NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stover. Now, President Bola Tinubu has, since his assumption of office, embarked on strategic foreign engagements with world leaders, many of which are investment-driven. And in projecting this agenda, the President makes a strong statement that Nigeria is safe for investors to put their resources and reap maximum output. Now, the drive seems to be attracting the commitment of prospective investors, but how will these engagements shape Nigeria's economic future? Tonight, we'll be dealing with Tinubu's economic diplomacy. Well, of course, as we know, the President is in New York, attending the 78th General Assembly of the United Nations. We do expect that at about 11 o'clock later tonight, he will be addressing the Assembly. When that happens, we'll, of course, link up live. But for tonight, our focus is on the Tinubu economic diplomacy. But just before we begin the conversation, let's get to see this report put together by State House correspondent Musbau Wahab.
President Bola Tinubu was back in the country with his team after his first official marketing drive in New Delhi. But coming on the way is a more than $14 billion investment to be added on to Nigerian economy. A stop in the United Arab Emirates also unlocked some possibilities. And now, the 78th United Nations General Assembly presents another opportunity.
He is going to continue advancing very aggressively on his economic development diplomatic drive.
The Nigerian leader is set for the world's biggest platform for decision-making, targeting more foreign direct investments. The captain of Team Nigeria is scheduled to meet captains of global businesses with potential impact on economic and infrastructural developments.
The President is determined to ensure that we don't just look at large industry, that we key in on opportunities that are being presented by small and medium-scale enterprises, Nigerian-owned small and medium-scale enterprises, and putting our own MSMEs in a position to make an impact in foreign markets. Yes, the President is focused in on attracting foreign direct investment, attracting jobs, attracting new tax revenues into the shores of our country. But he's also focused in on making sure that homegrown Nigerian companies have fair and equal access to foreign and international markets. This is a major aspect of the kind of wealth creation that Mr. President envisions in his renewed hope agenda.
The presidential advisor also revealed that heads of state, including U.S. President Joe Biden, are also on the line to receive the president in bilateral and multilateral meetings.
And there will also be the UN Secretary General's Climate Ambition Summit, at which Mr. President will be laying out his plans in concrete detail for Nigeria's energy transition and the role that our partners in the business community and foreign governments and non-governmental organizations will play in the actualization of Nigeria's ambition to get to net zero by 2060.
For you to be able to get investments, there are demands to investments. And the first demand will be that investment will meet business. And then the business will grow profit. Because everybody who is talking about or who's bringing investment to you, is basically looking for profit.
So the fact that the president himself is leading the team shows that we are interested in it. And are we ready? Of course, we are ready. So these things will start, and then you now begin to distill what are the issues in different sectors, who are the people, then who are the people that will follow up, put the right people in right positions, make sure they have the right expertise, to make things work. Because we don't have any time to waste. Investors don't have time to waste. I always say this, because as an investor, we need something Hofstede said when it comes to investment promotion. There has to be a cross-cultural dimension to it, to investment promotion, which means you need to be able to understand a man who has $1 billion in his account, the way he reasons is different from you that is receiving 200,000 naira as a director in ministry as your salary. So you need to understand his mindset and psyche to be able to deal with him. So you need to bring yourself up to a point where you understand that this man does not have time to waste. One of the companies, for example, said, Mr. President, do you know that we have had our document in the FCT ministry for over 1 year? Of course, which investor will have that kind of time?
The first appearance of President Bola Tinubu at the UN General Assembly and debate will equally give Nigeria a voice on the concluding phase of the Sustainable Development Goals. Musbah and Wahab.
All right, that report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let me introduce our guest tonight. We'd like to welcome to this program Ambassador Usman Sadki, former Deputy Permanent Representative of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to the United Nations. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this program.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let me also welcome Dr. Emeka Okengwu, economist, international business and project consultant. Thanks for being here tonight.
Pleasure. It's an honor to be here. Thanks.
Right. And joining us via Zoom is Dr. Segun Ajayi Kadiri, Director General CEO of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, at an appropriate time, the program will go interactive. And as we said earlier, the introduction, at the time the President gets to address the UN General Assembly, we'll go live to New York. But back here in the studio, let's begin to look at what we've chosen to call the Tinubu economic diplomacy. And with all these moves, how would you assess it, Ambassador?
Thank you very much, Mr. Stover. The economic diplomacy being deployed as a tool of engagement by Mr. President is actually a very long-standing, historic procedure adopted by governments and societies for many centuries. But the crystallization of the idea in the 21st century is reduced to actually bringing opportunities to your country through the agency of diplomacy and political engagement. So if it is carried out at the highest level by the president of the country, who is the chief diplomat, then it becomes a policy. So effectively today, the policy of the federal government is that of economic diplomacy through the deployment of political and diplomatic forces of Nigeria to attract investment into Nigeria, to facilitate trade and commerce. So in the few outings of Mr. President, notably when he appeared in New Delhi at the G20 summit meeting, and his stopover meeting with the President of the United Arab Emirates, he emphatically sold the idea that Nigeria is open for business, and also that we are now playing the game according to the rules, which effectively means that feel comfortable with Nigeria. It's no longer business as usual, where investors will come to the country running from one office to the other ineffectively, chasing a mirage. Now when you come to Nigeria, you are going to deal with a government that is serious and it knows what it is doing. So the idea is now gaining momentum, and I think it is something that is globally being employed by many countries, so we should not be an exception.
All right, thanks so much. Well, Dr. Emeka Okengwu, what are your thoughts on this diplomacy?
Well, I think the president has hit the ground running. He's doing all the right things at the level of what you've called economic diplomacy. However, there is a slight difference between economic diplomacy and drawing investments into your economy. At the level of economic diplomacy, the president has done everything he's supposed to do, called that interest which is a good sign, but not conclusive in drawing investments. This is very key. The demands of drawing investments, it's global. There are certain things, there are certain parameters that must be on ground. When the president says it's not going to be business as usual, it has to be shown by clear policy engagements or clear paradigm shifts. That has to be very clear. Because what happens usually is when the president finishes his diplomacy, the people who begin to walk the talk, who begin to not dot the T's, he wouldn't be there. There'll be demands. This is where you probably be looking at feasibility studies. This is where you're looking at bankables, how bankable they are. This is where you'll be looking at data. This is where you'll be looking at, even your cash flow curves. This is where you'll be looking at, your regimentations. This is where you'll be looking at, those policies, trade, industrial, security, et al., energy, and all that. But it's good news that, a lot of people are showing interest. And again, who wouldn't show interest in a country that has 86 or 83 million hectares of land arable, has 320 dams unused, has over 55% of its population under the youthful age, has, to my last count, about 60-something research institutes that has produced over 6,000 research outputs. So statistically, we are good to go. We are the biggest market. Trust me, we are the biggest market. There's nothing you bring into Nigeria that doesn't sell, that won't sell. However, Cyril, there is a difference again between trade investments, okay, that will bring in trading. Okay, you now start talking about what you're trading, what you're selling, what you're buying. And then when you now do actual investments, that now require a lot more time, a lot more money, a lot more patience, a lot more infrastructure. To get that done, unfortunately, it goes beyond a presidential pronouncement.
Okay. All right, we'll return and look at those issues as we go on, but let's go over to Dr. Segun Ajayi Kadiri and also ask his views on the subject at hand.
Okay, thank you. I think just like the earlier speakers have said, Mr. President appears to be walking the talk in terms of centralizing economic issues, which virtually everyone agrees that Nigeria needs at this time. And giving it an international dimension, speaks to the fact that foreign direct investment, partnership with the emerging economies of the world, and people, international capital that is always seeking where to invest, drawing their attention to Nigeria. It's a very good thing that the president is doing. And most of his talks has been dotted with meeting CEOs of international companies who have a lot of money in terms of the US dollars that Nigeria badly needs in order to reflate its economy and generally grow in the direction of developmental objectives. But like the earlier speakers have said, particularly the last one, it's an indication that there is actually a lot of supportive initiatives that needs to be embarked upon to ensure that all the attraction that Nigeria is seeking, that we are able to sustain the momentum even when those foreign investment comes. And it is actually interesting that this is happening when the geopolitics that has become quite important in the global space is happening, and Nigeria continues to play its multi-dimensional economic diplomacy, which does not really hold to any specific bloc, but is interested in partnering with virtually anyone that would support Nigerian national interests. So I think in essence, economic diplomacy, government has centralized President Tinubu is committed to it. Every time he goes, in fact, the last time I think he was in India, he went with quite a number of private sector players, which is an indication that he intends to carry them along. But I must say that what is going to determine the practicalization of all of this is the fact that those will-be investors are going to look into the country by themselves. They are going to look at the infrastructure that will support their investment. They are going to look at the ease of doing business. They are going to worry about the structural challenges that are here and how they will be surmounted for business, how institutional support will be given, what is our dispute resolution mechanism, and how our laws, particularly those ones that govern business, are respected. So I think while Mr. President is playing the economic diplomacy, there is need to strengthen the local institutions that will support foreign direct investment, that will also give assurance to those who want to invest that Nigeria really means business.
All right, thank you. And well, that's very much in sync with what Dr. Emeka Okengwu said in his opening comments. And that brings us to the point where we look at the infrastructure. Well, the president has gone, he's spoken to so many prospective investors, and he's outlined Nigeria's stage. But then, as has been mentioned, what is on ground, the infrastructure that the prospective investors will be looking at, those who are going to, as they said, walk the talk, those who will be in charge of the institutions, institutional frameworks, and of course, as Dr. Ajayi Kadri said, laws governing business, dispute resolution mechanisms. Do we see those being addressed on the local front as to stand up to the invitation that the president is dishing out?
Yes. Well, everything boils down to effective governance. When you have governance, especially organization, at the level of the ministries, departments, and agencies, you are now going to feel the impact, the cascading impact, the aggregate impact of the emerging trend in the country, whereby investors will feel that a difference is being made and the requirements are being put in place that will attract them to come to the country and feel safe in terms of conducting business. So whatever Mr. President does, he's leading towards a desired objective, which is to make the country better perceptually in the minds of investors, particularly foreigners. Now, the key requirements for this thing to happen is, first of all, like Mr. Kadri said, the rule of law is very important, very critical. Also, the way you organize your structure, state structures, how effective and efficient and responsive are they? So when Mr. President leads in the policy, ministerial responsibility will come in. How are ministers supervising their ministries? How are they leading their ministries to make them more responsive to the demands of industry, of finance, of banking, of investors? Then you come down to the level of the permanent secretaries and directors. So here, the way we organize our structures, they are very important. And the other thing is, domestically, whatever we do should be in alignment with international norms and laws and practices governing investment, trade, and commerce, which means we have to be aware of, for instance, what are the WTO rules in terms of trade in services, in terms of trade in commodities, in terms of protection of intellectual property rights, in terms of preventing piracy, and things like that. So it is a whole range of actions that are needed to be taken at the level of the country, which means when the president sets the pace, others in their own molecular units must be responsive towards addressing the critical challenges that are facing their units in order to aggregate the advantages for the country. So investment comes into sectors. It doesn't mean that we are not having investment. Investments are coming into Nigeria. But what we want to see is heightened level of investments in critical areas. For instance, how are we in the area of technology? We are rather below, the expected levels compared to the ASEAN countries, for instance. How are we in the area of automation of our industries? These are very critical areas if you want to compete globally. How are we at the level of innovation in the area of fintech? So these are things that our policymakers should sit down to look at and then aggregate the advantages that we have and look at the challenges ahead in order to ameliorate them to make the country a better place, better suited for investment. And I think Mr. Kadri or Dr. Kadri will understand, being the head of the Manufacturers Association, how critical policy is in terms of creating a conducive environment for manufacturers, for investors, for bankers, and for commerce in general to take shape and to move the country forward. Infrastructure like power, for instance, roads, rails, airports, and above all, national security. You cannot do without security. If you want an investor to come, if Dr. Okongo has $1 million today, I think he will prefer to invest it somewhere safe rather than to look at a chaotic, dangerous environment to go and invest in. So let us make our country safe for ourselves and for any other person or people who want to come into the country to do business. I think this is a very, very essential, critical requirement.
When you look at all these areas, you tend to think that it's a huge task to put these things in shape.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, we're not saying until everything is perfect before you can now ask people to come in, but there are certain basics. In fact, Ambassador Usman Sarki has mentioned a few of them. Tech, innovation, automation, energy, power, for instance, Dr. Okongo.
There's this very popular saying amongst, Americans, you do crime, you do time. It is because there is appropriate data and data interface infrastructure. Now, in that climb, what happens is that because they are able to appreciate that every person must be known by name and by character, it becomes very easy to be able to build a criminal database. Now, when you talk about infrastructure, you must be able to look at the infrastructure from three broad perspectives, what you call your critical infrastructure and your social infrastructure, and then your industry support infrastructure. And it depends on what you're applying that infrastructure to make it critical, because what is critical to me as infrastructure, if I live in a rural area, a clinic would be critical infrastructure, as against those of us who live in the urbanized areas. That same place might be social because you have a lot of choices. Now, this happens when you're not able to develop what you call a national development infrastructure master plan. And in developing this infrastructure master plan, you don't deal with physical infrastructure alone. You also talk about your human capital, which is also some critical infrastructure. And then you start talking about the techs. And how you aggregate, Cyril, is actually what makes the difference, between your policy and your program. In a country like Nigeria, where you have a lot of these research institutes churning out research outputs that cannot go beyond that research output or proof of concept, where the law does not permit you as a research institute in Nigeria or operating within Nigeria to be able to commercialize your research outputs. Now, this is where, again, the issues of policy, the kind of policies and who now drives your policy. Now, let's take it a little bit deeper. If you look at how your MDAs operate today, and you look at the presidential marching orders that have been given to them, you might be surprised to see that there is not any of those outputs that are supposed to be triggering, okay, the input or beginning of another ministry. Every ministry is standing, as a silo. We've not been able to get it to that point where you're now regiment, the activities and actions of these MDAs to now, tie into each other. Where one stops is where one begins. You find that everybody is on that first level. Now, if you try to drill it a little deeper, you will find where those fault lines are. The first fault line will be, why wouldn't you have a relationship between those ministries that are aggregated around resource development, what you call your natural resources? Wouldn't it make more sense for you to have water resources linking with solid mineral resources, linking with science and technology at the core, linking with industry as a subset? And then in this instance, now you are able to now, define which of these things will begin to now drive this process. Today we're talking about industrialization. We're talking about manufacturing. I'm very happy that the DG is here. At one time there was a publication, that over 70% of industries in Nigeria were either closing down or were, operating, at very low outputs. Now, what was happening? What was happening was that a lot of them couldn't get the required raw materials to be able to drive their production. And the moment you're not able to aggregate your raw materials, okay, now your energy cost begins to become a burden. Now the question will be, which comes first? Would it be the aggregation of your raw materials, or would it be the establishment, of your midstream industries, or will it be the markets? So these are the issues. When you want to talk about investment and then planning an investment pyramid, okay, somebody says to you, I'm a manufacturer, and 80% of the times I say to them, no, you're not a manufacturer, you're a producer. Okay, because what now makes you competitive, and a lot of the times, and this is what a lot of us don't take into consideration, we are competitors with those who are selling us the raw materials. And what we buy as raw materials in Nigeria are actually finished products of another person. And I can give a typical example: resins, polyesters, polymers. Now, when you go to China and buy those resins that you come to melt into molds and begin to now produce your plastics, they are products, finished, but they are raw materials to another person. And what's the link? The link is that you've not been able to, at the level of now, strengthening your research, be able to make certain that your petrochemicals now no longer end up becoming a waste product. It becomes a product that begins to support another industry. And that's how you can be able to stretch your manufacturing chain. So what I'm trying to make real is that it's easy to say, oh yes, we are manufacturing, we're a manufacturing outfit. But when you try to drill it down a little deeper, you will find out that, okay, I'll rest on this. Look at our clothing systems. I keep talking about this, non-woven. Now, non-woven has become a major ingredient for the production of textiles. And you have over 200 million people that need to wear these clothes. But you know what, bro? Okay, we are still treating petrochemicals as a waste product, whereas some people are turning it into non-woven and then turning it into fabrics.
Wow. Well, we go back to Dr. Segun Ajayi Kadri, and once again, the critical infrastructure you talked about and those laws. When you look at what's happening on the home front since President Tinubu assumed office, how would you assess the effort to put those things in shape?
Well, I think quite a number of infrastructure challenges that Nigeria has have been historical. In fact, some people have referred to it as familiar challenges. They are challenges that several governments in the past have tried to address, but we've not had a holistic approach to resolving the issues. And I believe that until we do that, until government realizes that there is a link between basically how you lay your bed and how you lie on it, then I think we'll start to get the issue of infrastructures right. The current administration has come in to promise quite a lot, and I think there has been a lot of reform measures that are being proposed. Some of those that have been implemented has to do majorly with trying to allow monetary policy and fiscal policies to have a handshake. And there has been a talk around developing critical infrastructure, which will normally include power, roads, and our ports. But in terms of whether there has been concrete steps that has been taken, I believe that the grants are just being prepared for us to embark on a sustainable reactivation of those infrastructure. It still takes about 2 to 3 weeks for you to even get your containers cleared at the port on the day from the day of arrival. And it costs about the same amount to bring your containers from Singapore to Lagos and to take you from Lagos to Agbara, that is just 27 kilometers away. Power continues to constitute anywhere between 28% to 35% of your cost structure. We also still have situations where it is difficult for you to understand whether regulatory agencies are there to collect tax or to perform statutory functions that to facilitate business. So all those challenges have remained. But in terms of what the president, Mr. President is doing, I believe that now that he has assembled his team, there is need for us to revisit those reforms of the last administration, which have tended to improve infrastructure. And a lot of funds have been committed. Quite a number of reform measures have been taken. Some of them have been enacted. And the stakeholders, manufacturers, and so many other business organizations have been able to support government to even develop some of those infrastructure needs. So I think that this current administration will do well to start on a sustainable and practical step by ensuring that they carry through with those reforms. The Power Sector Reform Act that we have now, which has tended to expand the field for more participants. I was looking keenly at what Mr. President Mr. President was talking to. And I think those who have indicated interest to invest in power, I believe government should give priority. So what I'm trying to say is to link its economic diplomacy with the need to develop the infrastructure that we have. We should be intentional about the kind of investment that we ask for. And we should not be under any illusion that anyone is coming to develop our economy for us. So I think we need to decide which areas we want those foreign investors to invest in. Investment in power can never go bad in Nigeria. And I think there are other sources of energy that advances have been made all over the world. So government needs to intentionally seek out those players in that sector that will be able to come in and improve our performance. For instance, if our Mr. President, I will indicate that if you are coming to invest in Nigeria, my priority would be that you come to add to the contribution of the manufacturing sector to the GDP that has not gone beyond 12% in our history. And in other economies that we have emerging, in other emerging economies, we have the contribution of manufacturing to GDP going 35%, 40%. This is where you can create jobs that is needed to reduce the tension, the frustration, and the hardship that we have in the environment. So my take is that, yes, the government has continued to indicate infrastructure development, including power, road, and rail. But it is critically important for us to link our economic policies, our economic diplomacy with reflecting the economy and providing for those infrastructure. We should not just go seeking to get investors that will invest in sectors that will not add value to our economic trajectory. And this speaks to the fact that government needs to create an agenda that all those foreign investors will buy into. We need an industrial policy, for instance, that will guide the kind of investment that we attract. We also need to ensure that at home, and I think it's been mentioned before, that our ministries, departments, and agencies of government do not operate in silos, so that together we can be united behind an agenda that government itself will pursue. And that should guide any form of investment that we see.
Right, of course, it ties in with the matter of the bureaucracy. And you heard in our opening report, just before the conversation started, where one of the respondents was actually talking about how operatives in the bureaucracy have to be on the level of the thinking of investors. He gave an example of someone with $1 billion thinking of investing and someone who's not operating at that level but is bogged down by bureaucratic bottlenecks. It doesn't seem to speak the same language. But this government says it's going to attend to the question of the bureaucracy, reorganize and recharge, as it were, some of the MDAs, ministries, departments and agencies, while new ones have come on board. And with the cabinet now in place, it's expected that things would start happening. And what direction should we go?
Well, we have the National Economic Council under the chairmanship of the Vice President, His Excellency Senator Kashim Shettima, GCON. And that council is a very important statutory body that gives direction in terms of the economic development of the country. So I would suggest that the NEC should take its time to look at the structures at the federal level and subnational level that are actually proving either facilitators of investment or obstacles to investment. If they are facilitators, they should be strengthened and made much more easier in their functions. And if they prove to be obstacles towards investment, they should be cleared away. So I would suggest operating at two levels. One, at the regulatory level. All regulatory agencies and policies, statutory policies that support those agencies should be harmonized in such a way that transparency will prevail throughout the system. Secondly, I would like to see the structures that are in place towards driving economic diplomacy or economic policy or development policy being harmonized with global standards in order not to make Nigeria an island unto itself, but to be plugged into the global economic development project. We cannot stand aloof from advances being made in other parts of the world that are being proven beneficial to those countries, and for us to refuse to take note of those best practices. How do you harmonize your customs and excise, for instance, the operations? How do you create efficiency in your ports? How do you regulate taxation? Who actually collect taxes? And at what level, and what are the laws governing taxation in this country? Taxation is a double-edged sword. Too high, it destroys business, and too low, it deprives government of revenue. So you have to look at a situation where optimization of policy will lead to better productivity in terms of the reaction of the investors and those in the business area. The other idea is for us to look at the global norm-setting processes. I don't think we pay too much attention to what is happening in the United Nations system. For instance, since when did our policymakers sit down to read the reports of UNIDO the United Nations Industrial Development Organization on Nigeria and Africa to see whether our practices are in tandem with recommendations for observing international standards. Since when did we sit down to read reports of UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, to see what are the recommendations being proposed, which are working in other countries, which we might observe and imbibe? When was the last time we took a detailed look at the World Trade Organization's programs and policies on trades in services, on trades in goods, on intellectual property, so that our domestic practices can be harmonized along those lines in order to create the conducive environment for us to attract foreign investment and also to make our economy more efficient, better organized, more productive, and stronger and resilient. So it is not just sitting down in your office, taking decisions without taking note or cognizance of what is happening around you in the rest of the world. Transportation, for instance, is the lifeline of any business, of any economy. Who has done a study on the efficiency and effectiveness of transportation in Nigeria? I understand for you to clear goods in Lagos port will take you 2 to 3 weeks. To move them out of the port area to Ijora will take you another week or two. And then to drive to Maiduguri will take you several days or weeks. And you are not even certain of reaching your destination. Each passing hour and each passing day, your goods increase in price and cost. Therefore, whatever you are doing in Nigeria, you are not actually competitive because the factors ranged against you as a business person are so enormous that you are just operating on the margins without creating opportunities towards growing your business, strengthening your productivity, and enhancing your competitiveness. So when we look at the policy of economics in this country, we have to look at it from top to bottom. What are the guidelines of the central bank in the issuance of foreign exchange, for instance? What is the operative principle of foreign exchange in Nigeria? Is it tenable for us to maintain 2 or 3 types of levels of foreign exchange rates in one country? Is it tenable for us to apportion or to really auction foreign currency to investors and manufacturers who desperately need materials from outside? Then what are the programs that are in place to substitute imports so that we can produce, like Doctor says, resins and polymers? Why can't we produce them in this country? Why can't we produce clothes and threads and other things that go into the textile manufacturing area? So the National Economic Council, chaired by His Excellency the Vice President, should call experts to deliberate for over a period of time, for instance, between now and December, what are the critical policy choices that government should make in order to make the economy efficient and effective. Economic diplomacy alone will not move this country out of its present position. Only effective organization, careful calibration of policy and harmonization of policy and standards and regulatory environment with global best practices can move us forward. Other countries have done it. It's very successful. Let us try it.
Okay. Well, the DG of the Manufacturers Association talks about fiscal and monetary policies having a handshake. Well, as we speak, there is a presidential committee on ground working to reform fiscal policy and taxation, which he just mentioned about now, and taxation. And these are all on the lines of defining how they will contribute to the climate for proper investments and to bring down these huge costs of business with all the multiple taxes and things like that.
If you looked at the budgets of any MDA, you will probably find why we have a lot of people out of the room. Because most budgets are broken into three broad, areas of expenditure. Your recurrent, which is further broken down into your consumables, and then your capital projects. Now, if you look at and there are no exceptions, capital projects of every MDA, you find it's either one headquarters building, zonal office building, something building that has to do specifically with that agency. And that's why I keep saying that the major problem is that there's a lot of delink. The gentleman who was talking about the man who had $1 billion, talking to the civil servant, okay, who doesn't understand that he has to be in a hurry, works within statutes that guide him. And these statutes are in subheads. So when you bring your $1 billion and go to that ministry, and it is not captured in any of those subheads, that $1 billion sits until it can be captured. That's very important. And then if you look at the way we operate in Nigeria today, the MDAs, everything that happens around, development seems to be around the MDAs. All the expenditure, all the input and outputs, just circles around these MDAs. And there's no one place, because we're talking about handshake now, that you mentioned, the physical and the monetary. Now, if you look at our monetary policy, for instance, and what has come out of it, it shows I'm looking for the right word, because if you ever read what has come out of the CBN report and the attacks it's getting now, it tells you how deep it goes, much more deeper than we can be able to appreciate, where you are seeing that as a government we are actually owing a bank some money that was never reported and nobody ever saw it in public. And that the claims that the CBN were making, if there's anything to go by, if what it is we read, are a far cry from what the true situation is. So it is not the physical and the monetary now having to get a handshake. There has to be a total overhaul, okay, of that relationship between the physical, or what you call your physical, and your monetary policy. But let's drill it down a little bit, sir, because it's important that we talk about development the way it is. Now, what will be the role of the MDA in the life of the person who lives in a CDA as a result of the expenditure of their budgetary provisions? Have you ever wondered? How does the activities of the Ministry of Science and Technology impact on that young man who lives by the shores of Shiroro and is a fisherman, or he's a farmer? You will want to ask. So it is one thing for you to be able to have policy that says, oh, we are going to be going global, exporting our goods and services. But the people who are producing it, can only be impacted if they are captured in the activities of the MDAs. And I want to talk about something like a Ministry of Agriculture. How does the expenditure, and I need for you to go through it, how does it capture that person who is using nets to go to the river to catch fish? Okay, which is captured under the purview of the Federal Ministry of Agriculture. How does their infrastructure, their capital expenditure, how does their recurrent expenditure, okay, which now has to do with their everyday disposable, how does it capture that young person who drives a keke? And let me tell you how you could have captured it. And this is what China did to now say, okay, we're going to be taking 100 million people out of poverty. Now, they went into scale that now started supporting sectors. Today, if you take an aggregation, a head count of the motorbikes we have in this country, you're probably talking about 20 million or maybe more. Now, the question will be, Mr. Soba, which agency of government has produced and marketed a two-stroke engine that you know of? Because we're not talking about your budget being able to now impact on the lives of people. The DG of the manufacturers had talked about, containers, that take so long, to be cleared and then move from the ports, to wherever it is they go to. I would like for him to also help us talk about the ones that move from the interlands and then how long it takes them to get into the ports. You'll be surprised that there are only empty containers going there. And this is why you don't have any cargo planes flying into Nigeria, except you're ready to pay the cost of bringing, that cargo and then flying it back empty, because there's nothing to put there. And do you know why? Because the activities of these MDAs that we are so fixated on, that we give these trillions and billions, have not been able to capture that man who now begins to be the person who stays in the rail sector. And this is where the first primary challenge is. Now, the second is that I had tried to do it at one time to say, okay, let us even start a database of our research outputs. You want to tell me why I can get one? You'll be shocked that it doesn't exist, not even amongst, the academic institutions. And then, not even that you have data, there are also reporting standards, for you to be able to generate and, store this data and retrieve them and use them for them to. Do we have the standards? So if you're not looking at the basic issues, the point I'm trying to make is that it's good for us to be able to talk about how we can be able to get our country to go global. And let me also rest on this. Before the white people came and so-called started, taking away our resources, they first built the infrastructure. And there is no major city in this country today, or most of the major cities in this country, were all warehouses. Okay, what they did was first and foremost develop the research institutes, okay, cut out the very good lands for those who are doing agriculture, and then started now making certain that the soil was yielding what they needed to get, to be able to get the volumes that led to those shiploads that created what we call the valorization model that has not left Nigeria in the past 40 years. And until you get to that point, point I'm trying to make is that I'm struggling to make this point so that it's clear. Now, as long as you have the kind of budgetary system that you have, people go to define their budgets, and by the end of the day, this cameraman is not captured. The man in the street selling up is not captured. The man who is driving a keke is not captured. You know what you're going to be doing? You are going to be creating this bulge of Nigerians who are excluded. And there is no amount of investments that you bring in that will not be a business that is looking for, profit.
All right. We also have a couple of reports we would like to take at this point. The first of them is from Lagos.
The diplomatic alliances embarked upon by the Tinubu administration have been commended by Nigerians and economic experts, as they say it is expected to attract foreign direct investments to the country, which will in turn boost the nation's economy.
Oil has been the mainstay of our national economy and international trade as well. But you have burgeoning industries, most of them in the areas of artificial intelligence, big data, green economy. So as the president goes from one country to the other, trying to raise these topics and trying to elevate them to issues of bilateral and multilateral relations, Nigerian economy stands to benefit by it.
President Tinubu's visits to India, the UAE, Germany, France, and South Korea, as well as that of Vice President Kashim Shettima, are among efforts at advancing economic development diplomatic drive by expanding Nigeria's frontiers in digital economy and energy while leveraging new innovation cutting across multiple sectors.
It should not just be about those people coming into Nigeria for to come and make money, to be part of this economy. It's also about Nigerians being able to go out there also and make money, or being able to sell our product, our goods and services in the international market and make money as well. So all that is required to take us away from this dependence on crude oil as the source of 90% of our earnings, are part of what we need to have at the back of our minds, even as we are negotiating businesses and encouraging other people out there to come into our economy.
With the president having a clear direction in all of these international commitments, it is expected that the benefits will materialize in form of job creation, boost local production, and accelerate economic growth. Financial analysts say while there is abundant gas in the country that is yet to be fully explored, gas flaring has remained unabated. Another area of comparative advantage for Nigerian commodities is cocoa and palm oil, and this requires technology to be fully tapped as source of foreign exchange earnings for government.
The whole essence is for us to be able to attract as many as possible of foreign investors that can come and set up factories in Nigeria for the production of these commodities in commercial quantity, because we have them here, but we don't have the technology to drive them. So in terms of leveraging, what we can leverage on is the technological advantage that other countries have ahead of us. So let us work with them as partners in progress so that we can build on this industry and begin to build a sustainable economy for the country.
With the commitment of the Tinubu administration to shaping the global framework and governance in all major international interest issues, especially in finance, climate change, security, as well as economic recovery measures.
And to do that, we have to be productive. Nigeria must be productive. We must have power, electricity, to be able to run our factories. We can't run factories on generators. It will not be profitable. So those are the things we have to do. And yes, people can help us, but the truth is we really must be strategic.
Public analysts are optimistic that President Tinubu's economic diplomacy model will speed up economic recovery for the country.
All right, next report comes from Kanu.
Kano is a commercial state with a population of over 20 million people who are mostly farmers and traders. The abundant arable land and conducive business climate has made the state an investment destination for both local and foreign investors. It houses the largest grains market in Africa, with tourism potentials, a reserve of untapped mineral resources, which if harnessed can promote the non-oil exports and support the growth of the nation's GDP. Experts believe that the recent bilateral agreements signed by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on economic diplomacy with countries like Germany, Netherlands, South Korea, India, among others, has the potential to improve diplomatic relations and strengthen the economic drive of the country.
Kano State of Nigeria today contributes between 75 and 80% of the total non-oil exports from outside this country. In matters or areas of agriculture, hides and skin, solid minerals, we are definitely well ahead of the pack.
Kano State has a long history of commerce and trade, and in fact, just looking at the expertise, transfer of that expertise in terms of technology advancement and transfer, that could be of great use to the country. And also, there are well-established markets in the states. We have the largest grain market here, and that could be an opportunity for development in terms of agribusiness development, food processing, export-oriented crops.
The highlighted agricultural produce like rice, wheat, hibiscus, sesame, among others, are some of the commodities the state produces in large quantity, sufficient for export.
We need to showcase what we have. There are a lot of potentials in Kano. I talked about water bodies, these irrigation facilities. We talk about fertile land. We talk about active labor force, the youth population. We talk about educated workforce here in Kano. We talk about the market and all these things. But if we are not showcasing properly, I would have loved to see, maybe watch on CNN and see Kano State showcasing the cultural heritage, the educational program. So showcasing what you have is the first step. That's the only way to attract people, to show people what you can do.
Considering the state proximity with some states sharing borders with some African countries, The Kano-Katsina-Marat Rail Line project of the federal government will facilitate movement, ease business transactions, and promote export. In Kano, Habib Hussein.
All right, we'll take a short break at this point. When we return, there'll be more on the economic diplomacy of the president. Stay with us.
Looking for a short-let apartment? Go no further. Farisala got you covered. We provide convenience for short-term rentals for travelers or people in between moves. Farisala, quality services for your maximum comfort. We look forward to welcoming you. For bookings and reservations, call 09114641880 or visit our website www.farisalashortlet.com.ng. Thank you. The counsel of our fathers.
I will urge and advise our younger generation to use talent and brain to sort out problems, not arms.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation.
My advice to these young people is please do not take us back to those harrowing days. You probably do not know what it is.
I believe we have fought one civil war too many in this country. So those who experience it will run away from it.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying with us. And, well, those two reports before we took a break talked about the huge potential, particularly the one from Kano. And, of course, if you recall, Kano was an industrial hub. Still efforts going on to return it to that status. And there are other areas where potential investors will be looking at. But one critical sector, and this let me go to Dr. Segun Ajayi Kadiri, for the manufacturer, and we started talking about it, is the question of power. People are coming to invest. What are we getting? What are the inputs into power? As you would recall, in the last few days, there's been a consistent drop, a sharp drop in output generated. These are critical areas that would need to be firmed up if you're talking of investments.
Yes, I mean, you put it mildly when you spoke about drop. I think we had a system collapse. And what this means to manufacturing, for instance, is that you are being deprived of, like, your lifeline. I've said earlier that power constitutes anywhere between 25 to 35% of your cost structure. And what is particularly important about this is that all other options that you may have, alternative that you may have to power your industries have been going up. We had the increase in price of diesel. We also had the removal of fuel subsidy, which effectively has put petrol beyond the reach of small and medium-scale industries that use it to power their generators. even gas, that is an alternative that many people have to spend a lot of money to convert their machines to start receiving gas, is being priced in foreign currency. And with the escalation of the forex rate, it has meant that even manufacturers or small and medium-scale industries that have converted their machines to take gas will have to pay more for power. So I believe that it is important for any government policy that is aimed at advancing industrialization or even improving productivity in other sectors must centrally confront the issue of making power available. In other economies that we compete with, because basically you need to compare yourself with your contemporaries or your competitors outside of the country, because they bring in their goods into your market. If they are coming from low-cost environments and the power and other infrastructure deficit has made you to operate in a high-cost environment, they come into your market and they beat you at home. So I think that it is important for government to prioritize, and we can never emphasize this enough, for government to prioritize the provision of needed infrastructure. Even embedded in government policy on power is, for instance, this eligible customer scheme, which entails that the 2,000 megawatts of electricity that we're able to generate but we couldn't with could be taken by people who require more than 2 megawatts by taking power directly from TCL. This has not translated to effective, what I would call effective reality, where you are able to have industries who are qualified to benefit from this scheme being deliberately supported to offtake. So we still have the situation where the power infrastructure that is required to transmit and to distribute becomes grossly inadequate. And some experts have said that it is partly responsible for the collapse that we have had. So I think that unless we address these issues, the idea of bringing in investors to come and invest in the economy will always mean that they will come and do as GSK has done, or do as Unilever that has had to reduce its portfolio has done, or do like Dunlop and Michelin. So the environment, the operating environment, has to be made attractive so that foreign direct investment is able to sit in. And there are several options that have been given to government as to intentionally make the environment far more conducive than we have at the moment. So to answer your question directly, power is critical. There are alternative sources of power that so many advances have been made in the world that government needs to concentrate upon. If all the trips of Mr. President, if one objective that we're able to achieve is to bring down the cost of power supply, I can assure you, in fact, we've done the study in Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, that if we can bring the cost of power down in such a way that it doesn't constitute anywhere more than 5 to 7 or maximum 10%, you are going to improve manufacturing contribution to GDP by more than 25%. You are going to ensure that companies that have long forgotten what profit looks like will be able to make profit. And particularly in some areas of the country where insecurity has led to a decapitation, basically, of industries. You need to be able to provide this infrastructure for them to come. In the Northeast, for instance, we've had about 50% of our industries close shop because of insecurity and the fact that they are not able to receive raw materials, neither are they able to sell their finished product outside of the environment. So now that the security is gradually returning, there is need for government to intentionally put in infrastructure that will support their reactivation so that we'll be able to have the revitalization of the economy supporting the peace. Otherwise, you are likely to have a relapse those who you have revamped are likely to see insurgency, crime, and criminality as a way of fending for themselves rather than engaging themselves in productive activities.
All right, thank you so much. Well, just a quick reminder here that we're closely monitoring the second session of debates at the UN General Assembly, where, of course, President Tinubu is billed to present Nigeria's statement. He's online to do that. And again, just to say that as soon as it gets to his turn, we'll link up live with New York and bring you the President's delivery of Nigeria's statement at the ongoing UN General Assembly. Well, back here, security, that is another aspect of it. And I know the President came in and decided to take a hard look at the security apparatus of the security architecture of the country and make a few changes in certain critical areas. But this, again, is key. No investment is going to sit in an environment that is insecure. You did say that as much in your opening comments.
Yeah. Well, security and insecurity are actually, two sides of the same coin. They dovetail to the absence of conditions of peace and safety in a given society or country. Now, how does that impact on productivity, on economy, on investment? Simple, because property and lives are not safe. Once you descend into that level of chaos and insecurity, it is almost difficult for you to progress to higher levels of development. So all you will manage to do is subsistence economy, subsistence production, small-scale household manufacturing, industrialization. Organized production becomes difficult or almost impossible. So security should be now seen as a factor of development in this country. And the government has the onus, the responsibility to create the conditions whereby there should be pervasive security and not pervasive insecurity. So the state has to be marshaled, aggregated, and the entire energy of the state must be focused towards eliminating threats to the state, to the country, to individuals, to the economy, to whatever paradigm that operates within the country. So it becomes an existential issue. And existential issues are handled and treated by large-scale demonstration of the force of the state. You cannot take lukewarm attitude, conciliatory attitude, half-hearted measures to defeat insecurity. What is happening in this country cannot happen in Saudi Arabia, for instance. It cannot happen in Iran. It cannot happen even in Iraq. Not to talk of China or Korea or other places. It will not happen at all. So why is it happening in Nigeria? I think there is a shortfall in terms of applying the capacity of the state to deal with threats. Here we have to sit down to carefully note that it is not everything that you have a right to conduct or to do. When we say freedom of movement, freedom of expression, freedom of action, it reaches a certain level whereby once it crosses the boundary of normality, it no longer becomes a freedom, it becomes a threat. So the state has to be organized in such a way that it responds decisively to dealing with insecurity. You can safely say there are people who are above the law in this country today. Once you carry a gun, moving around on a motorcycle, proclaim yourself a bandit, effectively you are above the law in this country. It shouldn't be like that. So what I'm saying is that we have to reorganize our approach to security, create the physical condition whereby lives and properties are safe and secure. You can travel from east to west, north and south safely by day or by night. You can leave your goods anywhere in this country, come back and get them intact. This is the condition that we have to restore. The other aspect of security is intangible, not physical. If you transfer money from outside, you are in the diaspora, for instance. When it comes to this country, how are you sure that money will go to the destination that you are actually sending it to? That is another type of security, institutional security. The banking system, the insurance system, the credit system, the market system, the operation of the economy must be guided by laws that are effectively implemented in order to create the dynamic of giving security to the operators. Whether you are coming from the diaspora, whether you are a foreigner coming to Nigeria to do business, or whether you are a Nigerian resident in Nigeria doing business, the same rules should apply to you in terms of protection of your interests, protection of your property, protection of your money, protection of your services, and of your person. So at these two levels, physical security and the structural institutional security that guarantees the clear, transparent, and safe operation of activities in the country must be guaranteed by the state, by the government. So the corollary aspect of the economic diplomacy is to strengthen institutions in this country. Regulatory institutions, security institutions, monetary, fiscal, whatever you can think of, must be strengthened and made more efficient.
Well, in the discussions with the leadership of the UAE, one of the areas of interest was mentioned as agriculture, and you of course have touched a little bit on that. And if the UAE, for instance, is interested in looking at the viability of investments in agriculture in Nigeria, then of course there are certain things Ambassador Osman Serkis talked about, which must be by global norms and standards. And,
well, I think the mistake we've made is to treat agriculture for what is not. What is agriculture? Agriculture is the study, the science, the study of plants and animals. That's agriculture. But out of that study, there are a lot of ecosystems that you can develop. And this is where I think, again, our nation seems to have lost it. Agriculture and food production are not necessarily the same thing. But food production is a subset of agriculture. And because we have this very big overhand, called the Ministry of Agriculture, that basically begins to become some jack of all trades and then eventually not doing any.
Right, now it's been restructured to agriculture and food security.
Beautiful.
Hoping that would now tailor it directly to those areas.
If you still call it agriculture and food security, it brings it closer to where we are supposed to be. I'll share one story with you. I had done a study for some group, during the early days of Boko Haram, and I said, let's just do some little thinking. Borno State government, where my big brother Ambassador Sarki comes from, maybe he can be able to help us. How many people do they employ, or were they employing before the collapse of the Lake Chad? And how many people were being, engaged in activities around the Great Lakes, region? You will find that over 80% of the citizens of Borno were actually, making their living within the Great Lakes. Planting, fishing, producing akama,
herding,
whatever. Now, at the point that the lake shrunk and had gotten to lost over 80% of its water body, nobody bothered to find out what those people were doing or what they had started doing after losing their livelihoods. Now, I'm trying to now create some correlation between what you call insurrections and insurgencies, and then these people that have become, state actors, that are taking places that are ungoverned. There's this video, making the rounds now of, people slinging AK-47s and then, interfacing with members of the Nigerian military.
Oh, well, the military hierarchy says it's investigating the authenticity of
whatever it is, investigate or not investigate, we have passed that level, Cyril, where cohesion, becomes, the only way to be able to deal, with insurrections. Now, this is where, science and technology should have come in. If you had 2 million people, and this is the argument I'm trying to make, you're from Niger State. Niger has about 3 or 4, dams that is supposed to. Niger has over 70,000 kilometers of land. Niger probably sits on the best arable land that any country can want to have. Niger can sit Ukraine twice by size. Now, every grain that we are producing, every grain that is creating, these global logistics bottlenecks, is actually coming from between Ukraine and Russia. That can sit twice into Niger State, where you come from, that has 4 water dams that can be used to irrigate the land to produce. Now, you have most of these insurgencies settling in Niger State, Syria, where you come from. They're actually taking territory, and people are paying obeisance to them. Now, what will be the matter? If it is economic, which primarily it is, this is the argument I'm trying to make, that if you do not have, a national compendium that shows you the statistics. There's something that came out from MBS, and they say, we've just recalibrated the thing, and then we're using man-hours available to somebody to now talk about people who are employed and unemployed. That's a little bit, taking it too far. It's a joke. I think it's taking too far, because that's not the reality in Nigeria today. The reality is that people are living below breadlines in a country where everybody is supposed to be gainfully employed. So in trying to deal with the issue of insecurity, it's also important we don't deal with that. I mean, these are criminals who have done ABC. Like, Ambassador said, yes, anybody who proclaims himself, slings a gun and he says I'm above the law, has to be reined in. But when you're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands, just this afternoon, somewhere in Imo State, 6 policemen were burnt. So tell me who we want to take an investment into that area for whatever is what. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that if we want to resolve the issues that has to do with our country, I had also gone into a conversation when I said, if you want to know who the potential armed robbers are, look at the percentage of those, who fall out in primary school, percentage of those who don't complete secondary school, percentage of those who never got into the university. Do an aggregation, and you can be able to give a percentage of those who have no future ambition, who have no skills, who can be engaged by society. What else do they take to crime and criminality? Now, it is that simple. So when you have a society that is not focused on skill, when we were growing up, Kano used to be a place you go to. If you weren't careful, the smell of alewa passing through Club Road will stick on your dress for another 2 weeks after you left Kano. 10 years after those factories broke down, a report came out saying that Kano had about 4 million youths, who were, addicted to drugs. These are facts. In Plateau State, there was another report that showed that, this was about 7-8 years ago, that 400,000 children, were malnourished and might not likely survive. Has any ministry, and this is why I keep calling out our ministries. Now, this was an IFAD or some international donor agency, report. Has anybody tried to find out what had happened? We have street children numbering about 20 million. 20 years ago, Cyril, we saw those street kids. I served about 30-something years ago in Castina. We had those 3 kids. So by now, they'll be in their 40s. Has anybody ever done, a follow-up on what happened to them from being in the streets until they got into adulthood? Do we have such statistics? And then what we see are criminals who are slinging guns. We are not seeing, people that society, failed in every, sense of the word. In that very basic responsibility you owe your citizens. We failed all of them. We failed them. Our schools are not functioning. Those who are functioning, you can't even afford to pay. Most parents are living under the breadline. There's no food to eat. So we are looking at something like Ambassador says that's existential. And it's just not, equip the security agencies, let them go out there. I saw this, it was in that Katongara or some bush, of people who, they had marched together. And there were more than 1,000 people in that forest. Willing, able, ready to announce that they were bandits. When the the matter happened in Zamfara, it was on your station that they ran it. A guy came out and said, okay, fine, you banned this gold thing. How am I going to feed my kids? I'd rather try to get them food and die trying, or they die, and I feel more fulfilled. Now, how has society helped, that young man in that desperate situation? Where is our social infrastructure? And this is what I'm saying to you, that when you talk about agriculture, you must be able to decouple it so that we can begin to now create ecosystems and economies. Now, we have cattle, by statistics, running into 24 million, heads of cattle roaming around Nigeria. Now, Cyril, we do not have one garden. I stand to be corrected. We do not have one garden of forage. We don't have any garden producing forage for 24 million cattle that will be requiring 500,000 metric tons of cattle every day. And yet you're talking about food security. So if you go to plant, for instance, and then you have 500, or 24 million cattle roaming around looking for grass, what are they going to be eating? Sand? How are you going to secure your food security? Where is the role of technology in what it is we're doing? You have 320 dams, okay, by my last count, 322. Not one of them is producing commercial fish. Not one. I stand to be corrected. Now, so how are you talking agriculture? How are you talking food security? When out of your 320 dams, not one is being populated, by Aqualife to be able to give you, and we are importing 1.8 million metric tons annually. Now, this is us with all the whole limestone we have. We're talking about job security here. And when me and you were growing up, Cyril, I'm married from the north. I've been married for 32 years. Way back in those days, we didn't live anywhere. We were going to the north until it was 7 or 8 o'clock. A lot of people will finish their Maghrib prayers before they start traveling. And for everywhere you stopped, you could get suya, you could get water, because people were gainfully employed. Zamfara, which you mentioned, 18 gineries, 18 standing, 18, all in full production until, 30, 40 years ago. Those gineries are still there. Now, people are still planting cotton in Zamfara. Olam is still planting cotton. Where are they turning? Where are they ginning it? Where are they turning it into lint? So these are issues. I mean, when you're talking about us building Nigeria, we should be able to, for those of us who have, who are a little older, okay, who are in our 50s and 60s, who understood that at one time we had our rails running in this country. And some of us, all you needed to do was take a school bus, put us in that rail. If your father was living in Kaduna, I mean, my father lived in Niger at one time, okay? All they needed to do was put us in a train, and then by the time we got there, somebody came to take us from the station. And I'm not from the north, for crying out loud. So if we want to talk about building this country that can work for everybody, we need to first and foremost look at the statistics, okay, that drive our planning systems. All right. That's where I think the issues, we like.
Okay, we have another report this time from Enugu.
Under the renewed hope agenda of the federal government, Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, on assumption of office, hit the ground running to deliver on his promises. In an effort geared towards creating a favorable business and economic environment, the president entered into a diplomatic deal with foreign countries and investors to attract investment opportunities and partnership that will be beneficial to parties involved. Enugu State, blessed with abundant mineral and natural resources, keyed into the president's diplomatic deals for accelerated economic development. According to the governor, mineral and natural resources like coal, oil and gas, fertile lands for agriculture, among others, abound in Enugu State.
I want you all to realize that Enugu has all the characteristics of a socio-economic hub. My administration's mission is to make Enugu State the preferred destination for investment, business, tourism, and living in Nigeria. Our core mandate is to restore Enugu's lost glory, to fully realize the state's latent potential, and to transform Enugu into an industrial and innovation powerhouse.
Students are of the view that these resources, when fully harnessed, will grow the state economy from the present $4.4 billion to about $30 billion in the next 8 years.
There are what is called natural deposits. We don't know how much. There is coal now. You don't know, they say coal and some other belongs to exclusive list. But I think the federal government is making some moves for some of the states to do what they have, to do what they can do. So they can reinvent coal if it is possible.
The Enugu State has other alternative means of or source of income. Other alternative source of income. Like agriculturally, they have other rice at Uzowani. It's a very good place for rice, and other rice is a special rice. It's just like foreign. There's no difference. It's even better than foreign rice.
By making Enugu State safe and conducive for ease of doing business, coupled with potentials it is blessed with, accelerated business, economic growth and development is around the corner. In Enugu, Chidi Okrafo.
All right, that report from Enugu, and let's at this point go back to the DG of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. In all of these efforts, where would you say the place of the subnationals, in other words, the states, where do they come in here?
Well, I think when many people talk about the budget of the country, they tend to focus on the federal budget. And I will normally talk among my colleagues that we have at least 37, if not 38 budgets in Nigeria. And that this budget is passed and appropriated to improve the lives of the more than 200 million Nigerians that we have. So the subnationals have critical roles to play in our economic development. And I was actually wondering whether, in terms of President Tinubu's economic diplomacy, the subnationals, who, because the federal government does not have any territory, every inch of Nigeria is covered by either a state or a local government, or states and local government. So whether they have a say as to what the aspiration of Nigeria is, and that speaks to how we derive our national interests and our national objectives. I think at the level of the subnationals, for instance, most of the challenges that has to do with, that limits, those binding constraints that limits economic performance actually take place in those states. The multiplicity of taxes and levies, for instance, across the three tiers of government is most prevalent at the states and the local government. But we have seen the federal arrangement that we have has not sufficiently empowered or enabled or taken into cognizance what happens at those levels. For instance, there are some states that we have had serious engagement with, and they have indicated that, look, you are a manufacturing entity, you are operating in my state, what do I have to gain? Your company income tax is paid to the federal government. The value-added tax is taken and shared across states, sometimes not mindful of how heavy in appropriate times they are collected from a place, and goods can move freely in or out of any state. So I think we have seen a situation where those states have tended to visit this loose federalism that we have, or unfair federalism, as some people will say. They have visited the pain on businesses. So I believe that the subnationals needs to be given more roles. We have spoken extensively about what the local governments are there to provide for the people. I would have felt that policing, for instance, and since we have spoken about security, if you are able to localize it to the subnationals in such a way that you have effective presence at every inch of this country by engaging the subnationals, you are likely to have more results. And in terms of how the subnationals see themselves as being mirrored in the federally allocated revenues, we have seen quite a lot of laziness, I must also say, among some subnationals, because they have had to rely on the federal government. But we needed to be able to unleash the potentials of these subnationals so that they can actively play in the national economy. I stayed for a very long time in Lagos State, and I have seen that the reason why there appears to be some more development in the state is that they have been able to harness the resources that accrue to Lagos State. We also have very big cities. You have mentioned Kano, for instance. I believe the other participants in this call are familiar with what used to happen in Kano, Bompai, and Sharada industrial areas. Our government used to rake in a lot of revenue from local taxes that they collect, but those industrial areas now have lost more than 35% of the industries if you compare now and 10 years ago. So the economic situation in the country has tended to even downplay the capacity of those subnationals. And I think that in terms of developing a national agenda, in terms of integrating our domestic policy into the foreign policy and seeing that there is a sync, there is a linkage, there is an aspirational acceptance of what we require is achieved. I do not think that any federal entity like Nigeria will be able to do well without allowing its subnationals, states and local governments, and the institutions that they have established work in sync. I think it is critically important, and I believe that even now that many of them are beginning to have foreign debts that appears to have been uncontrolled in the way that they have been acquired, and now it becomes an embarrassment to the country. So I think there has to be some measure of coordination and maybe assistance, if you use the words, to ensure that there is this cohesion that is achieved. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter where you come from. Most of the states have citizens from other states crisscrossing the state. So in order to build a Nigeria that is prosperous, we must be able to address those issues as subnationals.
Well, taking the argument further from that, the question of the subnationals and then the issue of debts, for instance, loans, by way of loans, which foreign loans that have come in. It would seem that even the president himself said a lot of the finances that come in are in terms of loans, and these are weighing heavily on the economy itself. Now, with the subnationals, the drive for investments, and for some of them, accepting these financial loans becomes a bigger embarrassment because some have been acquired not through the due recommended processes.
Well, if as for me, I think the greater challenge is not even that the subnationals are more or less running riot. It is that when you are now calculating our national debts, over 60% of it come from these subnationals. And a lot of it are also approved by the Debt Management Office. So this is where it's difficult to draw that line. Because part of, what is required for you to be able to get, foreign loans, even at the level of a subnationals, is that national, guarantee, which is issued, through the, office of the finance minister, and then who controls the Debt Management Office. So it's not done in isolation. Now, but how does this happen, and how do they get away with this? It's all in the name of infrastructure development. Now, the moment you bring it in as an investor who is now coming in, the other part of it now comes in as investors who now say to you, for me to be able to invest, give me a sovereign guarantee. Now that begins to show you that there is a lot of challenge, with our feasibility studies, if you may, with our cash flow, programs, if you may, with our return on investments, if you may, and then exposes you, to the level of our country, risk. Because this might sound a little surprising, but I believe that Nigeria is one of the few countries, that still do collateral lending. Now this is how these loans, begin to balloon. Now, but there's a greater challenge that I think we're facing from the subnationals. And this is the issuance of executive orders by governors. I mean, it's even gone beyond the issuance of these executive orders. I think the government of Taraba State, has gone ahead to start, persecuting some people who they have classified as illegal miners. And I stand to be corrected. Mining happens to be, the exclusive preserve of government at the federal level with regards to the issuance of licenses. Now, it does not stop. There's no law that stops the state from acquiring or applying for these licenses. So the first will be, what will be the basis of that executive order, and who now determines when a license is legal or illegal? That's question number one. And going forward now, I also think that the federal government, in its response, I wouldn't know, I'm not in government. I don't think there has been any purpose-driven, result outputted response by government to say, no, you don't have a right to do this, and no, you shouldn't do this. If anything we read in the press is anything to go by, when the Minister of Subliminals actually met the governor of Nasarawa State, who had come visiting, he said they were going to be working together. Now, that issue of executive orders, Siri, I can say to you, will destroy investments coming into the mining sector. No investor, this is an area I'm very proficient in, will put his dollar against the system where the laws are not clear, where you don't know who is the issuing authority. There's a bigger challenge, again, another challenge, from the subnationals. Now, a lot of state houses of assemblies are now passing their security outfits. Yes, security has become a challenge. Okay, if you remember, 1 or 2 states had actually passed, in the southeast, Ibubago, in the southwest, Amotukun, I think some other, group in the northern part of the country. Now, because there are no synergies, okay, within your federal structure, because I understand the police started issuing, some, orders or repeaters about the operations of these people. So in trying to create security, you can actually create more insecurity. And this is because the synergies between the nationals and the subnationals seem to be more political than it is operational. Okay, because like the DG said, every piece of land in Nigeria either belongs to, in fact, every piece of land belongs, because all of us basically, live in a local government. Now, but the question and the issues will now be, at what point in time do you now need to start, drawing this line, okay, of synergies? If the federal government, for instance, now wants to do a national agricultural program, at what point in time does it involve the state, the subnationals? Is it at the point of policy development or policy preparation, or is it at the point of policy announcement? And I can tell you, it usually happens at the point of policy announcement. Or this is a federal government policy for us to be able to do agriculture A, B, C, D, E. Now, we've announced the policy, we've announced the presidential committee on livestock management. Now, the question will be, did we do this after, a synergy, after some agreement or alignment with the subnationals? Or did we do this, or did we present this to them and say, listen, we want you to buy into this? And this is where the role, or we now begin to now look at the functions of the Ministry of National Economic Planning and Development. Now, who produces the KPIs? Now, who now measures it? In now, putting your M&E structure into place, who is involved in it? Apart from the silo system that you're running, even amongst, the departments and agencies, at that subnational level, do we have any involvement of the subnationals into the inputs, into national policies, okay, that will deal with something like food security? We're talking about the Ministry of Food Security. Which state government has a similar ministry? If you have food security as a ministry and the state government has agriculture as another ministry, haven't you seen the link?
Okay. Well,
that is why earlier on I emphasized the role of the National Economic Council as the overall supervisory body in the organization of the economy of this country. If the NEC can work effectively in terms of aggregating policy and politics, you see, what is creating a lot of problem in this country is the divergence, the discrepancy, contradiction between politics and policy. And if we do not harmonize the two, it will always be like oil and water. They will never mix, and they will not move us forward. Our politics must not be localized to the extent whereby antagonism is the driving force in politics. No, politics should be developmental in terms of creating the conditions for people to come into government and then to carry out policies. So if you succeed another government, don't jettison the policies of that government just outright without examining the merits of the policies that you have inherited. Without that, there can be no continuity. So the National Economic Council, under the leadership of His Excellency the Vice President, should examine the different perspectives, let's say on mining, on agriculture, on livestock, on water resources, on air pollution, on environment. There are critical areas that drive the economy of a country, even on population and development. When they make these mega trends, examination of these mega trends, they can now bring about an aggregated policy, a harmonized policy that the subnational level, states and local governments can adopt, key into and operate without violating the national constitution and at the same time operating within the boundaries of the law. So that is why I'm always emphasizing the rule of law, the harmonization of policies, and strengthening of the correlation between state structures, policy, and the operators of the institutions. If we do not get that right, we will always be floundering in the dark. Let me give you an example of how China did it 40 years ago. When Deng Xiaoping came, he looked at the entire spectrum of the Chinese economy, the ideology, politics, and state structures. And he said, no, we have to delink them. We have to create spaces for private initiative, not only at the individual level, but also at the provincial level. So they devolved a lot of responsibilities to the provinces. They created economic development zones. They created export processing zones. They created special economic investment zones. And within 10 years, from 1984 to 94, there was a dramatic improvement in performance of the Chinese economy. 40 years later, today, China is the second biggest economy in the world. It is becoming the most efficient economy today. So it is policy, actually, and the organization of the state structure, administration, and the laws that actually propel the advancement of economy. So as I said earlier, Mr. President is the chief diplomat of the country, and he is the person spearheading the economic diplomacy program. However, he cannot come to the ministry and operate at the level of minister. He cannot come to the ministry and operate at the level of PAMSE. He cannot be a director. He cannot be a state governor or deputy governor or member of the National Assembly or House Assembly. He rests at the apex. What he does cascades to the bottom. And from there, this cascading factor must be faithfully observed and repeated at the lower levels. And now you have coordination, you have synergy, like Dr. Emeka said, and you have focus. So that all the levels of government, local government, state government, and federal will move in tandem in one direction. You cannot introduce a policy on grazing. And then in Benue State, you get a governor who will wake up one day to say there is no open grazing, or in Taraba or in any other state, while the federal government is advocating, creating those institutions. You cannot come to the National Assembly at the federal level to promulgate a water management policy, and at the subnational level, they will tell you, no, the water is ours, you cannot touch it. If you are doing this policy in the interest of the entire country, particularly toward aggregating the productive forces of the economy to move the economy forward, then there must be harmonization and buying in at the subnational level to what the federal government is doing. And here I emphasize the critical responsibility of the NEC, the National Economic Council.
Oh, well, thank you so very much. That was rather comprehensive. But now let's get back to the DG CEO of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Just as Tuesday Live is winding down, what are your final comments about this shuttle economic diplomacy that the President has embarked on? What are your final comments on it?
Okay, I think there's a general consensus that Mr. President is doing the right thing and putting economic issues in the front burners. It is critically important, however, that we should ensure that there's a synergy between domestic and foreign policy, and also that our national interest enjoys stakeholders' involvement in order for us to create inclusive growth, and that we must, as a matter of necessity, improve on our macroeconomic and infrastructure in country before we are able to attract the foreign direct investment that we require.
All right, thank you so very much. And let me come to Dr. Emeka Okengwu. Well, we'd just like to appreciate you joining us on this discussion, and we appreciate your contribution so far. Dr. Segun Ajayi Kadiri, Director General, CEO, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. We thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
All right. And Dr. Emeka Okengwu, your closing comments.
Well, I think the president is leading from the front. I mean, he's hit the ground running. Every move he's made is very commendable. He's put us back on the world map. It's an area he's very, vast and has a lot of experience, and he's bringing it to bear. But I think it's also important that we encourage the building of those support institutions, we make, these efforts, yield the kind of dividends, that will be beneficial to all of us, just not only in building infrastructure, just not only in developing our economy, but building social inclusion, which seems to be in very short currency in Nigeria right now. So I commend him, and may God bless Nigeria. That will be my final.
All right. Thank you so very much, Dr. Emeka Okengwu, economist, international business and project consultant. We appreciate you being here.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Well, that's Tuesday Live. That's it on this edition of Tuesday Live. But just a quick reminder, President Tinubu is in line to address the General Assembly and present Nigeria's statement at the 78th United Nations General Assembly taking place in New York. And as we promised earlier on, as soon as the President gets on, NTA will link up live to bring you that. And so all NTA stations are to stay on the network service. They are to remain on the network service as we await the time President Tinubu would be presenting Nigeria's statements to the General Assembly, which is ongoing. We're keeping a close eye on proceedings there, and we shall bring you that live. So all NTA stations are to remain on the network service even after Tuesday Live. We'll conclude Tuesday Live at this point here, and we'll take up matters relating to the UN General Assembly immediately after, so all stations will remain on the network service. Thank you very much, and shortly we'll be talking about the UN General Assembly, which is ongoing. Thanks for staying with us. We're still here. I'm Cyril Stover, and I do have with me here Ambassador Usman Sadiki, a former Deputy Permanent Representative, Federal Republic of Nigeria to the United Nations. Ambassador, thanks for staying with us.
It's a pleasure.
Well, of course, the second session of debates are ongoing at the UN General Assembly in New York. Yes. President Tinubu is in line to present Nigeria's statements. Yes. And we await when he'll be making those statements. And so a few issues here I would like to just talk about just before the President addresses the General Assembly, with the theme rebuilding trust and reigniting global solidarity. There are so many issues which this session would be addressing, and it is President Tinubu's first appearance at a UN General Assembly. What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, I think that is what makes it so significant. It's his first outing at the United Nations General Assembly, and this is what is called the high-level summit segment. It's usually 1 week or 10 days where heads of state address each other and the whole world at the General Assembly Hall to project their country's image and also tell the world about their policies, their concerns, their priorities, and actually even suggest ways to which multilateral diplomacy and global governance can be advanced. So the theme of this year is centered around the actualization of the Sustainable Development Goals. As you know, the SDGs have 17 goals and around 136 targets, and they are supposed to expire or run their course by 2030. Sadly, or unfortunately, the Secretary General in his remarks today noted that only about 15% of the SDGs have been achieved. So the larger proportion of the SDGs have not been achieved. And the world may not see the achievement of the SDGs by 2030 at the rate we are going. So he said, instead of the policy of leaving no one behind, it seems we are leaving the SDGs behind. And that vitiates and defeats the purpose of the SDGs when we negotiated and adopted them in 2015. I had the privilege to lead Nigeria's negotiation in the Africa group. We were the one who were actually in charge of the second committee. And under that, we negotiated on behalf of Africa and adopted those goals and targets. So it will be a sorry situation to see them not being achieved. And remember, the Millennium Development Goals that were succeeded by the SDGs were not also fully aligned or achieved. So if we go at this rate, and especially with the way insecurity, the war in Ukraine, for instance, the insecurity, instability in the Sahel, military coups coming back in Africa, climate change, this will actually impede the progress of the SDGs at the national levels and regional levels, particularly in Africa. So I think, our president, will speak to the need to have good governance, because that is central to achieving the SDGs and also in translating globally agreed norms and processes at the national level. And good governance is underpinned by rule of law. You can't wake up one day to topple your government and expect stability in your country or in the neighboring country. So these are challenges that Mr. President will address, I think.
Well, speaking about the very poor performance of the SDGs as we approach 2030, Nigeria is part of the global community. And yes, of course, looking at it, you'd find out that those challenges are right here with us as well. And of course, if you're looking at the countries who might not hit the target, Nigeria is inclusive of it.
Yes, yes.
And you have also mentioned the place of good governance in attaining these goals. Going back to the matter of instability, especially in Africa, you see that that has also been a result of not having the kind of good governance that is desired in the region itself. So all these issues are intertwined.
Yes, they are, and that is why I think our diplomacy, our politics, and also our governance system and structures must respond to the demands of the moment in terms of creating conditions whereby policies are translated into actions, and actions become the driving force of governance. There is no point to go to a gathering like the United Nations, adopt a policy or program, key into that, and then come back to the national level and fail to implement them. It doesn't make sense. Once you adopt a program of which you are actually a negotiating partner, you come back to the national level, you translate it into program at the national level. And to do so, you have to commit the entire resources of your government, of the state, of the country, towards the effective implementation of that program. And mind you, sir, the SDGs are beneficial to our countries. What is the first goal? Elimination of poverty. And then it goes down to provision of education, provision of safety, provision of health, provision of housing, improving climate, improving security, improving water sources, and up to goal 17, which is creating partnerships. And partnerships are essential at the national, regional, and international level towards achieving sustainable development. So all these factors are designed in order to give a qualitative edge to the national system in terms of providing safety, security, and development to the people of that country. Today, we are looking at the devastation being caused by climate change in many countries. If responsible policies have been put in place 10 years, 15 years, 20 years ago, for instance, should we be having those consequences today? So I think multilateral diplomacy must be faithfully observed, and then decisions taken at places like the UN should be faithfully implemented at the national level for them to be meaningful.
For example, climate change, at some point in time, even the highly industrialized Western nations, some of them were not willing to accept the reality of climate change.
Yes, climate denial. That was what the Secretary General actually alluded to in his speech, that climate denial was actually bankrolled by big corporations and governments. But today, where are we? It's a reality that cannot be denied anymore. The problem with the big industrial countries is that they are the biggest polluters, the biggest producers of gases that actually created the ozone layer. They are the ones who are actually polluting the oceans, the seas, and the air. Now, cleaning up their own countries will be enormous in terms of sums involved. So they want to shift the responsibility to the entire world by refusing to take action at their own national levels. Who are the biggest emitters of carbon gases today? Is the industrialized countries. Countries that are industrializing rapidly and trying to maintain the pace of industrialization. What is Africa's contribution to global emissions? Very minimal. But we are suffering the impacts in terms of the refusal of the big countries to contribute to the loss and damage fund, which is only about $100 billion a year, as agreed to in the 2017 COP, COP27 in 2022 in Cairo. We are supposed to agree on the modalities for payment of loss and damage, about $100 billion every year, especially to developing countries who are feeling the impact. But there is no agreement as yet. Recently, a few weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, the African Climate Summit took place in Nairobi. And the summit reiterated the importance of agreeing to the loss and damage condition so that the $100 billion can be released to go towards the improvement of the conditions of countries affected by climate change. But there is no agreement. So the Secretary General's remarks today should set the pace towards the activities of the United Nations and also regional organizations like the African Union to create conditions necessary towards addressing mitigation and adaptation at the national level of the climate change, consequences of climate change. And also, we have to create linkages or to see what are the linkages between insecurity in the Sahel and the Lake Chad Basin with climate change. Is shortage of water, shortage of grazing areas, shortage of arable land, are they causing insecurity? Are they drivers of insecurity or what? Let us look at the way how artisan or artisanal mining is being done. Is this sustainable or is damaging to the environment? What is the role or responsibility of government in controlling the proliferation of mining, so-called illegal mining? I think we have to create standards that suit our purposes, that will not lead to the deterioration of an already bad situation in order to control them and create conditions whereby some sense of order and civilization can prevail in our country. Look at bush burning. Why are local governments not taking action against bush burning?
Right.
Why are we destroying our forests? Why are we cutting down trees?
Tree felling is another part of it.
To just create charcoal. And we export charcoal. Charcoal is something that you can control and prohibit from being exported in order to protect your forests. Your state, Niger State, Nasarawa State, Benue, Plateau, they are on the front line of destruction of their natural habitat. Today, effectively, we don't have wildlife in Nigeria. We don't have them. And these are things that make the aggregate impact of ecosystem rehabilitation and development and sustainability. In the entire length and breadth of Nigeria, we have reduced our wildlife to only pockets of protected areas. They are no longer roaming as they used to be 40, 50, or 60 years ago. They are no longer there. We don't control hunting. We don't control poaching. Everything has been reduced to profit making, to economics, to monetary gains. So where is the federal government? Where are the state governments? Where are the local governments? Where are the regulatory agencies? I think climate change and the implementation of the SDGs and the aggregate policies agreed to at the international level must be brought down to the basics in order for us to have a credible system of governance, of monitoring, of evaluation, of supervision and enforcement.
On the matter of poverty, well, parts of the world today are facing dire circumstances, and of course, especially in Africa, and Nigeria itself has had serious issues with dealing with poverty. And this is in the face of numerous programs set up by successive governments to address the issue of poverty alleviation, and support systems, social investments, and all of that.
Yes. Well, poverty is a phenomenon that actually can be eliminated. China has demonstrated you can eliminate poverty, at least in its extreme form, by really localizing development, by extending opportunities to households and to communities, by regrouping and reorganizing village systems, especially the production system in villages. The simple introduction of technology or production methods may drastically change the productivity and output of village economies. Since when have we seen the transformation of villages in Nigeria to better conditions, to make them more attuned to modern production? Today, actually, what we are seeing is actually the disappearance of villages, disappearance of rural community, because there are no substantial injection of focus and attention and resources into those communities to make them adaptable and sustainable in terms of the rapidly changing nature of modernization. So poverty cannot be eliminated without constructive policies put in place to be executed or implemented by all the three tiers of government: local government, state government, and federal government. Interventions and palliatives can only do so much to address it. What will happen if the bag of rice finishes in a week in a household of 8 or 10 people? What will happen if the carton of pig milk finishes?
Some households don't get as much as a measure of it.
Well, in Borno, I'm happy to say that our governor gives bags, not in noodles, they get bags. But even that is not sustainable. So what you need to do in addressing poverty is to sit down, to structure a policy on poverty reduction in the country. Not elimination. You cannot eliminate it altogether because poverty is relative in terms of access to resources, So you have to reduce it to the barest affordable minimum.
All these
Yes.
points to development efforts, but how challenging is this
Yeah.
in a world where the economy has slowed down in most parts, in particular areas such as Nigeria that has had to grapple with numerous other issues of development? So how do you go through all of this
Well,
in ensuring that these goals, at least, even if you do not meet those targets, you get up to appreciable levels of towards achievement of those goals? Because it would seem that you have a country that is dealing with so many things, you
Yeah.
know, at the same time.
Yes, maybe we are dealing with them in the wrong way. Maybe we are not actually paying enough attention to institutional structures that drive development. Maybe our policies are too loose and they are simply impossible to implement. Maybe we are not paying attention to corruption, because corruption itself is a debilitating factor that douses enthusiasm in terms of development of a country. Corruption itself actually is an element of insecurity in itself, because it creates insecurity, it creates instability, it distorts programs of government. So if we want to really, realistically, attend to the development needs of this country, we have to look at the governance space. Are we governing correctly? Are we implementing policies correctly? And then look at the factor of corruption. I was reading a speech that was given by Senator Shekarau of Kano, today on social media. I can't remember where he gave this speech. He said it is virtually impossible to reduce the cost of governance in Nigeria. And he was speaking from experience. As a former governor, as a minister, and as a senator, he knows what he's saying. So if it is difficult or virtually impossible to reduce the cost of governance in Nigeria, how are you going to maximize resources to allocate them to development? Because cost of governance essentially means just overhead in buying expensive vehicles, in buying business class tickets for people traveling, in paying for accommodation of officials, in paying for medical trips, in paying for newspapers, in paying for a range of services that can arguably be either essential or not essential, but at a tremendous cost to the system. If you cannot control expenditure, you can never balance your budget, and if you cannot balance your budget, you cannot have a predictable economy. And that is why the rule of law and implementation of regulations are very, very critical to ensuring that you have maximized the opportunities to develop your country and your economy. Corruption, cost of government, irregular or haphazard application of the regulations and law, and the lack of proper governance space based on rule of law. These are the factors that are actually creating havoc in our system and not allowing us to address things like poverty, elimination or reduction, employment generation, productivity, strengthening of state institutions, strengthening of our capacity, strengthening of the security forces, and so forth. So you are quite right, Mr. Stover, by saying that there is a whole range of activities, some of them very complex to resolve, by way of attending to meeting our commitments.
At the time the United Nations was formed,
Yes.
many of the countries in Africa were not under democratic rule. Some scholars have attributed this to, have said the result of this is the fact that the voice of African nations is still not as strong as should be at the United Nations. And for long, we've talked about the matter of the Security Council.
Yeah.
Why it has been long overdue to have a presence there.
Yeah.
And people believe that there should be a strong voice. And when you look at Africa, who else but Nigeria?
Yes. Well, the issue of Security Council reform has been there on the agenda since 1965, I believe. When, as you know, the UN was created in 45, the San Francisco Agreement, and 65 is just 10 years, 20 years after the creation of the UN. The first
Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly,
President
I have the honor.
Tinubu of Nigeria is about now going to present a statement, the Nigerian statement at the UN General Assembly. So let's listen in.
President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and I invite him to take the floor.
Mr. President, Head of State and Government, Secretary General, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the people of Nigeria, I congratulate you on your well-deserved election as the President of this session of the United Nations General Assembly. We commend your predecessor, His Excellency Chaba Korochi, for his able stewardship of the Assembly also. We also commend His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, for his work seeking to forge solutions to humanity's common challenges. This is my first address before the General Assembly. Permit me to say a few words on behalf of Nigeria, my country, on behalf of Africa, my continent, regarding this year's theme. Many proclamations have been made, yet our troubles remain close at hand. Failures in good governance have hindered Africa, but broken promises, unfair treatment, and outright exploitation from abroad have also exerted a heavy toll on our ability to progress. Given this long history, if this year's theme is to mean anything at all, it must mean something special and particular to Africa. In the aftermath of the Second World War, nations gathered in an attempt to rebuild their war-torn societies. A new global system was born. And this great body, the United Nations, was established as a symbol and protector of the aspiration and the finest ideas of humankind. Nations saw that it was in their own interest to help others exceed the rubbles and wasteland of war. Reliable and significant assistance allowed countries emaciated by war to grow into a strong and productive society. The period was a high watermark for trust in global institutions and the belief that humanity had learned the necessary lessons to move forward in global solidarity and harmony. Today, for several decades, Africa has been asking for the same level of political commitment and devotion of resource that described the Marshall Plan. We realize that underlying conditions and causes of economic challenges facing today's Africa are significantly different from those of post-war Europe. We are not asking for identical programs and actions. What we seek is an equal, firm commitment to partnership. We seek enhanced international cooperation with African nations to achieve the 2030 Agenda and Sustainable Development Goals. There are 5 points I want to highlight. First, if this year's theme is to have any importance at all and any impact, global institutions, other nations, and their private sector actors must see Africa as a development priority, not just for Africa, but in the interest of us all as well. Due to both long-standing internal and external factors, Nigeria's and Africa's economic structures have been skewed to impede development, industrial expansion, job creation, and the equitable distribution of wealth. If Nigeria is to fulfill its duty to its people, I know, and the rest of Africa, we must create jobs and the belief in a better future for our people. We are pushing for that. We must also lead by example, and we are doing so, to foster economic growth and investors' confidence in Nigeria, and remove the costly and corrupt fuel subsidy while also discarding a noxious exchange rate system in my first few days in office. Other growth and job-oriented firms are in the wings. I'm mindful of the transient hardship that reform can cause. However, it is necessary to go through this phase in order to establish a foundation for durable growth and investment to build the economy our people deserve. We welcome partnerships with those who not mind seeing Nigeria and Africa assume larger roles in the global community. The question is not whether Nigeria is open for business. The question is how much of the world is truly open to doing business with Nigeria, and how African is an equal, mutually beneficial manner. Direct investment in critical industries, opening airports to a wider range and larger quantity of African exports, and meaningful debt relief are important aspects of the cooperation we seek. Second, we must affirm democratic governance as the best guarantor of sovereign will and well-being of the people. Military coups are wrong, as in any titled civilian political arrangement that is will perpetuate injustice. The wave-crossing part of Africa does not demonstrate favor towards coup. It is a demand for solution to perennial problem. Let us dig it deeper. Regarding Niger, we are negotiating with the military leaders. As chairman of ECOWAS, I seek to help establish democratic governance in a manner that addresses the political economy challenges confronting that nation, including violent extremists who seek to foment instability in our region. I extend a hand of friendship to all of you who may genuinely support this mission for a democratic governance in that nation. This brings me to my third crucial point. Our entire region is locked in protracted battle against violent extremists. In the turmoil, a dark channel of inhuman commerce has formed. Along the route, everything is for sale. Men, women, and children are seen as chattel. Yet, thousands reach the Sahara, hot and sand, and the Mediterranean cold depths in search of a better life. At the same time, mercenaries and extremists with their lethal weapons and vile ideologies invade our region from the north. This harmful traffic undermines the peace and stability of the entire region. African nation will improve our economics so that our people do not risk their life to sweep the floors and streets of other nations. We also shall devote ourselves to disbanding extremist groups on our turf. Yet, to fully contain this threat, the international community must strengthen its commitment to arrest the flow of arms and violent people into West Africa. The fourth important aspect of this global trust and solidarity is to secure the continent's mineral-rich areas from plundering and conflicts. Many such areas have become catacombs of misery and exploitation. The Democratic Republic of Congo has suffered this for decades. Despite the strong UN presence there, what happened? The world economy owes the Republic of Congo much but gives her very little. The mayhem visited on resource-rich areas does not respect national boundaries. Sudan, Mali, Burkina Faso, Central African Republic, and the list grow on and on and on. The problem also knocks at Nigeria's door. Foreign entities are baited by local criminals who aspire to be petty warlords have drafted thousands of people into servitude to illegally mine gold and other resources. Billions of dollars meant to improve the nation's economy now fuel violent enterprises. If left unchecked, they will threaten peace and place national security at a grave danger. Given the extent of this injustice and the high scales involved, many Africans are asking whether the phenomenon is by accident or by design. Members' nations must reply by working with us to deter their farms and nationals from the 21st century pillage of continent riches. Fifth, climate change severely impacts Nigeria and Africa. Northern Nigeria is honored by desert encroachment, hounded from the north. All are arable lands. Our south is pounded by the rising tide of coastal flooding and erosion. In the middle, the rainy season brings flood that kill and displace multitudes. As I lament death at home, I also lament the grave loss of life in Morocco and Libya. The Nigerian people are with you. Please note that. African nations will fight climate change, but must do so on fair and just terms. To achieve the need popular consensus, this campaign must accord with overall economic efforts. In Nigeria, we shall build political consensus by highlighting remedial actions which also promote economic good. Projects such as Green Wall to stop desert encroachment, halting the destruction of our forests by mass production and distribution of gas burning stoves, and providing employment in local water management and irrigation projects are examples of efforts that equally advance both economic and climate change objectives. Continental efforts regarding climate change will register important victories if established economies were more forthcoming with public and private sector investment for African preferred initiatives. Again, this will go far in demonstrating that global solidarity is real and working. As I'm about to close, let me emphasize Nigeria's objective accord with the guiding principles of this world body: peace, security, human rights, and development. In fundamental ways, nature has been kind to Africa, given abundant land, resources, and creative and industrious people. Yet, man has too often been unkind to a fellow man, and this sad tendency has brought sustained hardship to Africa's doorstep. To keep faith with the tenets of this world to this body and the theme of this year's assembly, the poverty of nations must end. The pillage of one nation's resources by overreach of farms and people of stronger nations must end. The will of the people must be respected. This beautiful, generous, and forgiving planet must be protected. As for Africa, we seek to be neither appendage nor patron. We do not wish to replace old shackles with new ones. Instead, we hope to walk the rich African soil and live under the magnificent African sky, free of the wrongs of the past and clear of the associated encumbrances. We desire a beautiful, prosperous, vibrant, democratic living space for our people, where we do it. To the rest of the world, I say, work with us as true friends and partners. Africa is not a problem to be avoided, nor is it to be pitied. Africa is nothing less than the key to the world's future. I thank you for listening.
De l'Assemblée générale, je tiens à remercier.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Republic of Nigeria for his statement, and I ask Protocol to please escort His Excellency.
Well, there you have it.
The Assembly.
President Tinubu just presented Nigerian statements to the 78th UN General Assembly there, And of course, Ambassador Usman Sarki, just a quick recap of the points he put across there. You know, he started off by expressing displeasure with the what he called broken promises, unfair treatment, and exploitation. And of course, he says if this year's theme is to have any meaning, then these issues must be addressed. And he then went on to present a position on so many of these things. Violent extremism, part of them, the matter of climate change, and meaningful debt relief, he says. What are your general impressions of this?
Well, I think in our preliminary discussions we have addressed all this. We anticipated that he was going to speak about this, rule of law, good governance, security, climate change, and so forth. But I think this first outing, as I said, is a test, you know, for Mr. President in terms of the capacity of engagement, the quality of engagement that he is going to have with other world leaders. On the margins of the General Assembly, he is going to meet with leaders like President Joe Biden of the United States and many others who would like to have one-on-one meeting with him. So that will give our President the opportunity to articulate not only Nigeria's position, but Africa's position in terms of the 5 principal areas that he has outlined in his speech, and also to tell them about the opportunities that are available in Nigeria and Africa. So effectively, when the Nigerian president goes to the United Nations General Assembly, he is actually functioning in 2 capacities, or dual capacities, as Nigeria's leader and also as a principal responsible voice of Africa. So his interaction with the Secretary General and other leaders, especially non-African leaders, will boil down to trying to convey and articulate and canvass Africa's position on the various multilateral issues that Mr. President has so effectively and concisely outlined.
And as he said, he says we're seeking equal, firm partnerships and collaboration. Those were his exact words.
Exactly. And that is especially in terms of implementing the 2030 agenda. For instance, areas like taxation, double taxation, areas like the debt relief, areas like rules-based trade at the international level, these are areas that will require equity, and also in terms of understanding of Africa's conditions and challenges. Many of our problems are not actually made by us or caused by us. They are external to us, extraneous to us. We don't have control over international trade, for instance. We don't set the rules. We don't drive the process. We actually respond to rules and processes that have been established externally. So these are the areas where Mr. President, coming from the experience of leadership in private sector, corporate sector, he is telling the world that let us create an equal playing field whereby Africa can also contribute to the development of the world. He said we are not going to be pitied. We should not be seen as a problem.
Yeah, that's
you know? So that is what he's saying. Look at us as equals. Deal with us at the same level field, and then you can see how far and how much we can do.
Okay, and it is with those words of the president asking the world to work with Africa as true friends and partners, and that Africa is not a problem to be avoided, nor is it to be pitied. And he rounded off saying Africa is nothing less than the key to the world's future.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
You notice he didn't speak about Ukraine and other things, these problematic issues, which is good. He should focus on our needs, on our challenges, and I think that was what he did.
All right, and I would like to, on that note, would like to thank you very much, Ambassador Usman Sarki, just former Deputy Permanent Representative to the United Nations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stover.
Through from Tuesday Live right up to this point, we have the President presented.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you
it's a
very
privilege.
much.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
And this is where we'll wrap it up, and we'll straight over hand proceedings back to Nancy Gordy Anonihu, who is in our international studios for NTA International News. Nancy, it's over to you.
Thank you, Cyril. Here is the news. World leaders gather in New York for the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly, UNGA 78, with the focus on rebuilding trust and reigniting global solidarity towards the actualization of the 2030 agenda. And Nigeria's President Tinubu has just finished addressing the UN General Assembly, where he said Africa is the next frontier holding the economic future of the world. Uche Ugochukwu reports that 4 out of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council are absent at the session.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, in his opening remarks at the 78th session of the UN General Assembly, called for a reform of international institutions, including the UN Security Council and international financial architecture.
The world has changed. Our institutions have not. We cannot effectively address problems as they are if institutions do not reflect the world as it is. Instead of solving problems, they risk becoming part of the problem.
For the U.S. President Joe Biden, who seems to be the only permanent member of the Security Council attending this year's session, the war in Ukraine is top on his agenda.
If you allow Ukraine to be carved up, is the independence of any nation secure? I'd respectfully suggest the answer is no. We have to stand up to this naked aggression today and deter other would-be aggressors tomorrow. That's why the United States, together with our allies and partners around the world, will continue to stand with the brave people of Ukraine as they defend their sovereignty and territorial integrity and their freedom.
On climate, he said he is treating it as an existential threat and that the world needs to reduce its dependence on fossil fuels.
When it comes to China, I want to be clear and consistent. We seek to responsibly manage the competition between our countries.
With so many important figures in one space, there is also an opportunity for leaders to hold meetings on the sidelines. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron, China's President Xi Jinping, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak are not in attendance. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is also at the meeting with leaders of about 200 countries. Uche Ugochukwu, NTA News.
Meanwhile, President Bola Tinubu has been advancing Nigeria's readiness to strengthen economic ties with countries of the world ready for genuine business. The president projected this course as he received some heads of state and businesses on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. State House correspondent Musbaud and Wahab reports.
President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa was the first knocking on the door of President Bola Tinubu for bilateral talks. It was a meeting of the two African giants. In that way, the two leaders have agreed to project at the United Nations General Assembly. President Tinubu asserted that Africa must have a consensus that the hundreds of billions of dollars spent through international development finance institutions over the years must meet the specific needs of developing democracies in Africa. The Nigerian leader believed that Nigeria and South Africa have all the human and natural resources required and so can collaborate in a mutually beneficial way that enriches the two countries. President Tinubu said South African business community has done well in Nigeria and also believes that their mining industries have a role to play in the Nigerian solid minerals development. Referencing President Tinubu's quick implementation of what he called brave economic reforms, the South African president agreed that the two countries have much more wealth to create together in close and intentional partnership, with each nation leveraging on each other's respective strength. President Tinubu equally had bilateral discussions with the President of the Union of Comoros and Chairperson of the African Union, AU, Azali Assoumani, and Tinubu said the AU is strategically positioned to secure a common position for the continent on economic and socio-political relations with the world. He acknowledged there is nothing